conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about Unbabel, what we do, why are we doing what we're doing, why are we building what we're building. The main problem we're trying to solve really is that we all think we live in an English-based world, and that was true in '98. But realistically, what's going on is that the internet is diverging when it comes to languages. If you think about it, it's so easy to create content nowadays that you create content in your own language, which means that you're actually having a Chinese internet and a Russian internet and a Brazilian internet, and English is actually expected to bottom out at 10% of the web in a couple of years, right? And this is a huge problem if you think about it, because it means that any business that wants to be global needs to figure out how to deal with multiple languages. Not just businesses, but any organization, any nonprofit, any government, any idea, any content that needs to be global needs to deal with language. And this is a huge problem, right? Because this is not easy, right? That's our mission, right? This is what Unbabel is building, is we're creating the world's translation layer. And we think we can do this because there's going to be 2 billion people with a smartphone by 2020 that speak more than one language. The way that we think and we see this vision happening is by empowering bilinguals with artificial intelligence. So bilinguals with smartphones, and then artificial intelligence to take the brunt of the work. The basic idea is the machines do 95% of the work, humans do the rest. The combination is a scalable global infrastructure for multilingual applications. And so this is one of the main bets that we're doing, and one of the big changes in how people are going to be able to interact and to participate in this ecosystem is by actually being able to translate without typing on your phones. Most of you probably have smartphones, right? If you want to type right now, it's actually kind of cumbersome. If you want to make money by typing on your phone, you're actually painfully slow. And so we think the key aspect for enabling people all over the world to be part of this system is actually to remove typing from the equation. And we do this because we have our own machine translation engine that is able to provide you with options that you can select to create a better translation. Basically, in terms of pipeline, here's how the Unbabel translation pipeline works. You have machine translation to begin with, so the goal there is to provide you with the best initial translation possible. And then think of this as a map reduced for translation. So where people are mappers, right? So you have the stuff coming out of machine translation, broken into pieces, sent distributedly to a bunch of mappers all around the world that do post-editing of the content, and you can have a sequence of mappers to basically improve content as it goes along. And at the end, you have the equivalent of a reducer that basically recombines everything, does a final pass, and sends it forward, right? I mean, this enables you to do things really quickly, really at scale. Not only we've been able to do a couple of million words in 1 or 2 days so far, and we're just beginning, but also we're now able to provide human quality translation, and depending on the size of text, sometimes in under a minute, right? Which is something we're very proud of. And so the way this technology, right, the core of Unbabel communicates to the world is through this API. The Unbabel API, you can check it out at developers.unbabel.com. It's fairly straightforward. I'm here to talk a little bit about, how you can build stuff on top of it, show you what we've built on top of it, and then, maybe talk a little bit about why we think APIs are so important in this ecosystem and enabling a lot of the transformation of the world that we're seeing today. So here's the request translation, right? It's nothing complicated. You basically, this is a curl example. You have an API key that you get from Unbabel. Use your username and the API key. It's a simple post. The endpoint is you translate, and this is a request. So you send a text and the target language you want. We do automatic recognition of the source language. And then the response, in this case, as you can see, would be something like this that would return a new ID. And then you do another call, I'll show you in a second, to then either get the output of the translation, or you actually can provide the callback URL where it's there, and the API will post the output of the translation to that callback URL once it's finished. Keep in mind that this is not instantaneous because it actually has human labor on it, right? And so, as such, you should expect a few minutes of delay depending on the size of text that you're sending. If you are using the machine translation aspect of it, then it's instantaneous. The human component obviously takes more than a few seconds for now. So this is basically the request that you do once, if you want to check if a translation is done. So you basically use the same endpoint, but you add the UID that you had before at the end. And then, as you can see in this example, it's a hello world, and you have Olá Mundo for Portuguese. Hopefully, most of you understand that. This is how to request machine translation. So the example I showed before is you request full human translation. In this case, you can also request machine translation. The endpoint is different. Everything else pretty much stays the same. The only difference is that if you check the UID, right afterwards, you're going to have an immediate response, right? So you can immediately get it back, and it will be posted much, much quicker on the callback URL. What's the difference? A lot of times people ask us about what's the difference between us and Google Translate. So it's very important to say this, especially in this crowd. You can think of Unbabel in one of two ways, right? You can think of us as the machine helping humans. In this case, it's more of an AI augmented translation. Or you can think of us as people helping the machine, right? In that case, it's more of a Google Translate on steroids. The main difference is that not only we do machine translation, but we do human translation, which actually enables you to have efficient and quality communications in a bunch of different settings, while in Google Translate is good for gisting, but you can't really rely on it for quality. Let me show you actually that happening on Postman. So, see here, but there we go. Okay, so let me see if I can do this here. So this is the example I showed you before on headers. The authorization. Please don't copy my key. And the test hello world. And if you send it, basically you're going to have the example I've shown. And here is the check translation. Right? And then I could check on it, and here's the hello world. This is very straightforward. I mean, that's the beauty of this thing, is that the API itself is really straightforward, right? You have text, you want to translate it, you send it, you get it back. You can post a callback, or you can ask to see if it's ready. Very straightforward. The cool stuff is the stuff you can actually build on it, right? Because with this, you actually have the ability to build stuff that function multilingually. Right? And everything that you're doing pretty much can be made better if you make it accessible worldwide and globally. Right? And for that, it needs to be in multiple languages. So one example is bots. Bots have been, basically they have arrived, right? Suddenly there's like bots everywhere. I'm sure a lot of you are building bots in one way or another. So it turns out that one of the problems that we see with bots is that bots basically have the same problem as humans. You train them in one language, and then people are going to interact with them in a bunch of languages, and suddenly that sucks, right? So we built Cyrano. Why Cyrano? So here's an example. You build a bot, and it's set for English. Most bots are. That's how you trained it. All of this data, you either use rules or you use machine learning, but you created something that is able to interact in English. And then, if you ask, oh, do you speak Portuguese? Usually the answer is nope, right? You can try it online. Find bots online and try to interact with them in different languages, and you're going to see how sucky that is. And it turns out that for most of us here, that's not a problem. We kind of all speak English. But 75% of the world doesn't, right? And actually, the majority of people that are coming online right now doesn't. So how are we going to solve this? Cyrano is that idea. So how does this work? Let me actually try and do a live demo on this. It's always a bad idea to do live demos, but hey, it's hackathon. So if it fails, you guys will understand, hopefully. Okay, cool. So I'm at Cyrano page. You could actually, this is a sample page we built. And Cyrano is really meant to be an API specifically for making bots multilingual. You just add our API, and we function as a layer between your bot and the person that is interacting with it. And then if you define it as English as the default language of the bot, if they interact with you in English, then our layer would just be a proxy and conversation would just flow. And if someone starts interacting with you in a different language, we'll basically enable you to converse, we'll enable your bot to converse in that language. Let me give you an example of that. So I'm just going to send a message. There. Okay. Okay. So you can see it tells you like that's using the Cyrano API to be able to communicate. If I say, Bom dia, Cyrano, it basically says it in Portuguese. I could continue to converse. If I switch to English, it doesn't interfere, so it will be just the bot. If I switch to, let me see if I can write Italian. That's always Jordan. No. Switches to Italian, and try one more. So I'm just showing good morning because it's a different scenario, but basically it's one bot. Think about it. The bot only speaks English, right? It's the same bot. You train it once. But now you add this API, and this bot can talk to anybody in the world without you having to add, to retrain, to get more data. You just add this API, and that's it. Suddenly, the entire global population is able to converse with your bot, which is pretty cool. Very straightforward. If you go to Cyrano.unbabel.com, you can request an API key. It's a separate API that sits on top of the Unbabel API. It's a little bit more palatable for bots, and it has a lot of language that makes more sense. But it's very straightforward to implement, right? This is a good example. I don't know if anybody wants to try saying something. Oh, and this is an important point. So you see this bad translation here? So the way it works is, it's this concept of progressive translation. So in the case of bots, speed is very important. So what you're seeing is actually machine translation provided on top of the bot interaction. Sometimes if you say good morning, that's going to be fine. But if you start interacting with something more complicated, a lot of times the machine translation is going to suck. With Cyrano, we didn't want to do a full-fledged translation process. So what we're doing is we're letting you, the customer of your bot, so basically the person that is interacting with your bot, decide whether that translation is good or not. So if Cyrano responds with something that is crappy, you just click this button, and it will upgrade the translation to full human. I'm going to try here. Right. So this is basically, it's upgrading the translation. In the meantime, it's telling you to go check Cyrano API because this is, obviously for demo purposes. But that would be the idea. Then it would post here the result. Now, the new thing coming, which we ended up it's not quite ready to show yet, but it's actually taking this one step further. It's what we're calling Unbabel conversation. So the next step is actually we developed this thing called quality estimation that basically enables us to tell when a machine translation has good quality or not. And so with that, we actually can make this process even more seamless. And then you as a developer, you don't have to think about whether you're choosing machine translation or human. You just want it to make the best decision and send you something that is correct. And so the next step is actually something that decides on the fly whether it should send machine translation or actually reroute it through humans so that at the end you have the result you're looking for. Cool. So let me go back to the presentation. Cool. So this is an example of Cyrano. This was here in case the demo didn't work. Always be prepared, right? Cool. So what's going on in Cyrano? This is a good example of an application built on top of the API. What's going on is you have Facebook Messenger, everybody knows that, and that communicates with the service. It's built on Flask. That is the Cyrano itself. So Cyrano is basically something that communicates with Alice. Alice is, it was basically an engine built for dialogue and conversation, so you can build your dialogues there. It's one flavor of a service that you can use to build a bot now. And then also communicates with the Cyrano API itself, and the Cyrano API knows how to interpret bot commands and then send them to Unbabel back and forth and do that translation. Right. Why did we choose Alice? So there's a ton of them now, right? I mean, there's Wit AI and Chat Fuel and a bunch of other ones. Alice is a little bit older, but it has a lot of knowledge inside. So you start with the base of general conversation. So I could have asked our bot a bunch of different things around the world. I can ask it to do math and a bunch of other stuff because the basis of Alice already includes all of that. So you can just customize it a little bit and get something off the bat that enables you to do a lot of the general purpose stuff. It also, if you remember Eliza, so a long time ago was the first conversational agent. Alice is kind of an evolution of that, a little bit more sophisticated with more stuff inside it. So it's a good place to start. A lot of the stuff that's being built nowadays with Facebook with Wit AI and Chat Fuel is much more scanning through your data and coming up with good responses. Alice is rule-based. It has its own little language, a little bit like Lisp, but it worked quite well. So it's based on Eliza, as I was saying. And then it uses AIML, so artificial intelligence markup language, to be able to code stuff that. And it has 25,000 categories, has basic knowledge, and then it uses a graph to decide on the response, right? The bot's based on machine learning, though, like with AI, you create experiences or frames, and they call it different things, but you create the potential representations, and then ideally what they want to do is make this much more automatic. So the Cyrano API, as I was explaining, let me get the clicker, sends a message. So you get a message unknown to the bot, right? You define what your bot language is, and you just say, hey, here's a message. It understands that it's not in the bot language, and then what it does is it stays in between to reply in the bot language. Why is this really cool? One of the things that we realize is two things. So one, bots are very keyword-driven still. And so when you do machine translation on the inbound, actually that kind of works. But also, if you think about it, intelligence is not just the content, right? It's the form. It's how you say something, right? You can go to Google, do a query, get something that provides you the right information, but because it doesn't sound human, you don't really think it's intelligent. On the converse, you can have people saying really stupid things, and you'd still say they're somewhat intelligent. Just think of Trump, right? So clearly, content is not the thing that defines intelligent by itself, right? It's really also the way that you say it, right? I don't know if you heard people speaking with a British accent, they immediately sound smarter, right? There's a lot of cues that we take in the form that is delivered. So if you think about it, if you add the Cyrano API to a bot, given that there's people in between, you could actually be adding intelligence to your bot because the humans can take the output of a bot that is semi-structured and maybe not very human and would make it very human, right? In the way that they would say. They would take something that sounds like data and come out with something that sounds like, bones, for example, very emotional, very human. And so injecting AI in a different part of the process through humans was something that it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, it's another step towards bots being our overlords and having humans help them sound intelligent, which I thought was particularly ironic. Okay, so, and then if, in this case with Cyrano specifically, if the human doesn't understand the automatic translation, then, you basically upgrade to humans, right? That's the basic idea. Okay, so here's ideas for apps that you could build with the Unbabel API. Right? So every one of this service pretty much, would benefit from being multilingual. From anything that you do, think about the stuff you do in it. Like if you're working in a company, your company has your website somewhere. Could be WordPress, could be GitHub, right? You're using it to you're going to send newsletters, maybe use MailChimp or some other marketing service. You test pages we know. You send your emails with SendGrid or some other email service, right? You have your own email in Gmail. You do, you chat with other people in your Slack environment. All of these processes need to be made multilingual, seamlessly multilingual. You can't be waiting to be able to go out and decide, oh, I need to translate this Slack message. That doesn't make sense, right? It needs to be a layer in your day-to-day life that just enables you to function in a multilingual world, right? And so that's kind of the challenge with Unbabel. We have this API, and you can literally take this API and integrate it with any of these services and have it be more valuable, right? And have an app that runs on top of it. Right? We chose to do, we have a Zendesk app right now, we're launching a Salesforce app, we did Cyrano, we're doing conversation for Messenger, but there's like thousands of others that we could do, right? And that's why one of the reasons that we're here is to try and encourage people to build stuff on top of our API, because it's actually really, really useful. You know, for someone that is not able to have access to the global world because they don't speak English, it really sucks that, you know, that people are not using our API more. If you think about it, even in customer service, right? If you don't speak English and you're trying to interact with the product that you bought and you have a hard time, you're really having a worse customer service. And we've tried this. We sent a bunch of messages to companies worldwide in Portuguese to their customer service to see what they replied. Most of them, they either say, you know, we only do English. Some of them say clearly they don't even understand what language you're trying to interact with them with, which is like, sorry, I couldn't understand what you said. And it's like, really? Just use fucking Google Translate at least, you know? Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, you know, foul language on stage, so apologies for that. But yeah, so that's kind of the challenge, right? How do we get the whole world to integrate with every single one of these apps so that we can actually enable the world to be multilingual, right? And it's really an API world. Like, all of these apps have APIs that we could use to integrate them, right? It's all about taking the right input-output, you know, the right API connected with Unbabel and do something that increases value, right? I mean, AI is booming. There's already an intelligent assistant landscape, right? I mean, this is just for intelligent assistant. You have like a ton of them. More and more companies coming out every day. FinTech, the same thing. All of these companies, you know, have APIs, have integrations you can build on top of it. And if you think about it, there's kind of 4 game changers in the world going on right now. They're going to affect our lives, all of you, while you live, right? I mean, autonomous vehicles, they're coming out, right? They're already in Pittsburgh. Google's experimenting with them. I heard some project that one Portuguese city might become a focal point for this, which would be awesome. But realistically, it's very, very likely that, you know, in our lifetimes, this will be a reality, right? There's a ton of APIs for cars. They communicate using services that use APIs, right? That's a core part of what they do, right? The blockchain, something completely new that enables you to have financial transactions without the need of lawyers and accountants and a bunch of stuff. It's going to revolutionize the way companies work, the way transactions happen, the way banks work, the way societies are able to exchange information in cash, right? Most of it is through APIs, right? You can interact with all of the services through APIs. This is also going to have a ton of impact in your life. Internet of Things. I don't know if we have Venom in the house, but, you know, kudos for them. They're doing an awesome job in Internet of Things. Again, it's going to be API driven, right? You can actually interface with your thermostat or your home remote system or whatever gadget that, you know, your fridge, hopefully. I don't know why, but, you know, you will, right? And this is going to be, you know, an API driven world more and more, right? I mean, I always think that a lot of people sometimes tell me, you know, oh, coding, it seems so boring. People come out at you and they give you the specification. It's like, oh, you sit down and you do what other people say. And nobody ever gets it, right? It's about creation. It's about this blank slate and being able to envision something and build it. That's what we're doing here, right? That's really, really cool. And the cool thing about all these technologies is that they're going to enable you to do this in the real world, right? It's not just about creating some cool apps. It's actually about able to have those apps having impact in the real world because they're accessing APIs to things that actually exist. And that means that our creative power becomes bigger. Our ability to interact and impact the world becomes bigger. Finally, artificial intelligence. This is something very dear to us at Unbabel. So, you know, we have a strong AI team. We're developing some very worldwide cutting-edge stuff on AI. You're more than welcome, any of you, to come by Unbabel and check it out. You've seen also our booth here with Vive. I thought we were going to be like one more VR headset in the house. As far as I can tell, we're the only one, so you should check it out. Vive is freaking awesome. And you're welcome to come by and try it in our office. We're thinking this, why do we do Vive? Why do we do this kind of stuff? Think about it. We're all looking for better ways to interface with our brain. You know, like right now, the way to interact with AI is through your fingers mostly, your phone, you know, your voice sometimes. VR gives you the possibility potentially of having a higher bandwidth of interaction with, you know, augmented reality and virtual reality being extra layers. But really, what we're looking for is the ultimate API, right? It's an API towards your brain. So Elon Musk recently was saying, they were asking kind of what his vision for AI was. I don't know if you guys saw that, but there was two things he was saying that I very deeply believe in. One is the democratization of AI. So it's very important that AI is not locked in the hands of one or two people, but that all of us are able to use these tools and the power that they provide. And there's a lot of people working on how to create tools to make it easier and easier for all of us to be able to use this technology without having to have PhDs and spending a lot of time just looking at the nuts and bolts. But the other is really that it's this AI-brain interface, right? So if you think about it, we already have a limbic system and a neocortex, right? And they're very different systems, right? So one is about your feelings, gut feelings. The other is about the rational part of your brain. They already interface through an API internally, and it works pretty well. Right? I mean, no one is saying, oh, I have a bug in my neocortex to limbic system interface. I want to get rid of one of them, right? I think also, as Elon Musk was saying, that the next step is actually thinking of your brain as expanding beyond your physical self. That is already happening, right? I mean, how many of you remember phone numbers anymore because they're stored in your phone, right? How many of you are, more and more relying on GPS for navigation? Those capabilities are existing outside of ourselves. They're just slow to interact with. So, I know that this is not something we're going to work on here today, but I'm hoping in a few years in Pixel Camp, we're going to be able to be working on a real brain interface as the ultimate API. And I can bet, that at that time, language is still going to be very crucial for having brain-to-brain communication. Thank you. Cool. Questions? Yes. Is there a mic for questions? I see something here. I don't know if it's a mic. Nope. That's a gong. It's the opposite of a mic. No? Just go ahead. I'll repeat your question.
Morning. How do you manage, for example, a community of bad translators? Because if the algorithm learns from bad translations, it becomes worse. Do you have any mechanisms to prevent that?
So how do you manage bad translators, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Very carefully. That would be the answer. But so one thing that we're faced with very, very strongly when we started Unbabel is the very definition of human error, right? It's there's this, underestimation of the problem that you think, well, you have a human, you put it on top of machine translation, and voila, perfect quality. Well, turns out we as humans suck at this kind of stuff, right? We're really not built for doing repetitive tasks that require focusing completely to not miss specific things, especially in areas that other humans are very keen at immediately, recognizing errors. It's something with language that, if you see something in your language, you're very quickly to realize, like, oh, wait, there's something wrong with this sentence because it's so, optimized in your brain. And what we realize is that right now, there's no really effective ways to manage translation quality that are actually bulletproof. And so what we do is we right now at Unbabel have probably the most sophisticated evaluation method for translation and translators in the world, and still is very far from where we want to get. The way it works right now is basically someone applies to be a translator. We do different tests to ensure that they have the capabilities of translation. We're now working with fake tasks where periodically we inject fake tasks in their stream with errors that we know in advance to understand if they're able to correct those errors or not. Every week we do 20% of task evaluation. We do spot check evaluations on translators, all fairly optimized and in the platform. But that still only gives you the ability to understand if someone has the quality overall and not whether that job in particular has quality, which is a big issue because everybody has, bad Monday mornings, and sometimes they're trying to do three things at once, or, they're just not attentive, or is it subject they're not very comfortable with, or something, right? So even despite of all of this stuff, there's still a lot of human errors. Part of that is mitigated by having a sequence of translators. So, you check the machine translation, I check your work, and so on and so forth in this kind of map-reduced system. But a lot of times, and that's actually what we want to do, is get to a point where we're actually able to evaluate each job before it goes to the customer, right? And we're working on something we call smart check technology that helps you do that. So to check different errors, it also both helps you translate better, but also serves as a way of analyzing the kind of quality that we think you're having. We're working on quality estimation, but quality estimation right now is applied only to machine translation and not yet to human translation, which is really, in the end, what we want, or one of the things that we want. So it's definitely an evolving process, right? There's no one answer silver bullet. It's about having better people, better methods, giving them the right stuff. So if you give someone the right content, they're much better at it. If I give you something about a programming language that you are familiar with, you're going to be much better than someone that is a professional translator, but they're not a developer, right? So it's your having the topic of expertise makes a huge difference because you have all of this context already embedded. Yes, in the back.
Hello.
Mr. Celso.
Hi, Vasco.
Shoot.
Thanks for coming for Pixels Camp.
Thanks for inviting me. It's awesome.
Great presentation.
And congrats on on Pixels Camp. It's pretty awesome.
Well, thank you. I have 2 questions for you. First one is, you mentioned that humans are a big part of Unbabel's mission and, translation architecture.
Yep.
And do you see, do you envision humans to be important in 10 years when it comes to solving the translation problem? Or do you see humans as something that's required right now, maybe for a couple of years, and then machines will do the rest? First question. Second question for you is, a lot of the languages in the world are not written, they're only spoken or symbols. How do you see services like Unbabel solving that part of the translation problem?
So the second question is easy. I don't know. I think there's 6,000 languages in the world. If you want to do all language pairs, that's a big number. We do about 80 language pairs, 100 language pairs right now, 23 languages. It covers about 93% of the world. Realistically speaking, I think, we would like to be able to cover the entire world. When you go into languages that are almost extinct, there are languages that are like 30 people speaking, right? There's not enough data. There's very little need also outside of those people, right? So it's a very small part of the problem and very, very, very hard. So realistically, in the next 5 years, I don't know how we're going to solve that, right? I don't know if we're going to get to a point where it's like, that's the next thing we need to do. And even if we did, I don't think there's a good solution for that because you need to acquire data somehow, and if it's not written, I guess, there's a lot of advance in speech recognition. You can collect data that way. We're also working on kind of Unbabel for transcription in kind of the back burner. So speech will be something at some point that Unbabel will start tackling. And then when you do speech to speech, then that's going to become more relevant and maybe easier. But it's definitely not an easy problem. The second one is easier, I think. The second is yes. I mean, I don't know about 25 years. Who knows, right? We might have a singularity by then, and then all bets are off. But for the next 10 years, I do think humans are going to be an important part. The way that we see it is, so right now, there's roughly 500,000 professional translators in the world. They're the same pool of people that freelance for all the jobs. That's really non-scalable. I mean, that's one of the reasons why there's such a small part of content actually being translated, is because there's a small pool of translators, and so the bandwidth is very low. What we see is an evolution of think about it this way. So right now, a professional translator does about 400 words an hour, right? And in Babel, they do around 1,200 words an hour because of all the technology assisting them, right? Imagine that you could actually have, per person, be able to do 40,000 words an hour, right? Meaning that the reality, like the amount of human effort that they actually spend is so little that on average, for 40,000 words, they spend an hour of human effort, right? Which means the vast majority of that is actually automated. So that's where we want to get. But the amount of content in the world, if that's true, your cost of translation would be so low that you're actually unlocking a lot more layers of content. So think about, for example, newspapers, right? I mean, the amount of money in newspapers is not that much, as we know, but that being said, there's a lot of value of having that content available, globally. So there's a price point. If you made translation essentially free, then why wouldn't you translate all the content, right? And at the same time, so the amount of content suddenly available for translation will become exponentially higher, while our idea is that our community is going to grow linearly. But the difference in gap comes from the technology, right? Conversely, if someone is responsible for providing that much value, you're actually able to pay them better for the work that they do. So the effort per hour, if they're responsible for 400,000 words, you can actually pay them much better than what you do now because they're unlocking much more value. And so that's kind of the vision, right? We think fundamentally, to solve translation, you need to solve AI. If you think about it, language is probably the most obvious expression of our intelligence. If you talk to someone that has a strong accent, the same way that a great accent might make you sound smarter, a strong accent does the opposite, right? And we're very biased towards these preconceptions. And so, and there's a strong correlation with that with general AI. And the reality is that we don't have any clue on how to solve general AI. I mean, all of this hype that you're seeing about machine learning and deep learning and all of this stuff, it's definitely deep learning is a step up from statistical methods that we were using before, but it doesn't mean we actually figured out conscience. It means that we're just better at detecting patterns. Now, is intelligence truly patterns? I think there's more to it than that, right? And we don't really know where to start really tackling actual general machine intelligence. I mean, there's strides to it, but there's no end in sight. So I think the next 5-10 years, there's going to be things that humans are just really good at. We're just really good at nuance and subjectivity and metaphor and really understanding, taking into consideration, cultural references and understanding when it's appropriate to say something versus when it's not. So the way I envision this is humans are going to become more editors of machines providing potential translations, and having humans use their knowledge instead of being able to do the kind of the drone work, being able to say, hey, no, this is not appropriate to say, yeah, this is better, use this, here's how you coordinate the work of machines, and then in certain specific cases inject specific knowledge that is very particular to that situation. But at the same time, it's your brain being augmented by AI, right? It's the ability to use AI to empower you and to increase the value that you're providing. But without the human there, then you're not able to translate. And so we still very much think that humans are going to be a core in the next 5-10 years. Then afterwards, we don't know. Cool, thanks. Any more questions? Everybody's still asleep? There's Red Bull over here. I don't know if I'm allowed to distribute to everybody, but fire my concern. Cool.
Hello,
yeah,
Vasco.
In the back.
Hi. I have a question. I don't know if you answered it before I came. The question is, did you talk about, are you charging for the API for people that are using the API? And if you're not charging now, when you start charging, what will be the range that you're talking about?
We are charging for the APIs. So we're experimenting. So most of the companies integrated with our API have specific translation needs. And so we charge on a per word because we have to pay humans. So that's the thing, right? Every time that we translate through humans, we pay them. We pay them between $8 and $20 an hour right now, depending on the language pair and who it is and a bunch of other stuff. But we pay them basically. So we have fixed costs that we need to take into account. So our customers, pay us for not for using the API, but for the translations that they consume through the API. Right now, we're not charging anything for machine translation, just the human component. Our goal is to bring that cost down. In a way of thinking is we want to bring the cost down to a point where cost per word becomes meaningless, where you can actually go in and buy a subscription that gives you unlimited translation for your use case, right? As a company, you should be able to have. So what I encourage people to do if you're building something on top of the API is that we're going to provide you free credits and we're going to, give you enough stuff to get started. But then your customers should really have an account at Unbabel, and then they should use your service by adding their API key to your service. And this way, they're actually paying the translation themselves. You're actually providing or if you want, you can do a markup on top of that, and depending on the integration that you're doing. Yeah. But the sandbox is free. The human API part is paid. Any more questions? Are we good? Was I too fast? I tend to speak a little bit too fast. Cool. Okay, guys. Thanks. Good luck.